Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. What do we have today, Krystal?
So the president's tweets telling a group of congresswomen to go back where they came from. Got to talk about that. And we have a new poll in the Democratic race this morning that I think might surprise a few people.
Very surprising to me.
All of that and more today on Rising.
Happy Monday, everybody. So, Krystal, what's on your radar?
So on my radar this morning is AOC's public whatever. Remember that one of AOC's first acts in Washington on the very first day of freshman orientation, she wasn't even sworn in yet, was to join with activists in a climate protest outside soon-to-be Speaker Pelosi's office. Now that act should have told you everything you need to know about AOC and her theory of change. No official title was going to transform her from movement activist into Washington insider. Tensions between Team AOC and the movement that she represents, and Speaker Pelosi and the political establishment that she represents, have broken into public view over the last few days. This latest escalation started when the speaker chose to dismiss the AOC squad as four people with no following who only, quote, have their public whatever and their Twitter world. Clearly, the speaker is more threatened by their public whatever than she cares to admit. Otherwise, she would not have taken to the New York Times to diss them and then called a caucus meeting in an attempt to bring them to heel. Obviously, the squad has not been shy on the other hand, about unapologetically making the case for their own view of the situation. Now, it'd be easy to dismiss all of this in the mocking and sexist way that powerful women are often dismissed as a, quote, catfight or a meow mashup, as Kellyanne Conway did, whatever that is. But the truth is, this is more than some minor intra-party subplot. This is, in fact, an expression of an existential clash between the old way of doing politics and a brand new way. The problem isn't really that Pelosi isn't liberal enough. It's that the whole project of trying to appeal to the center and begging Republicans for votes is an abject failure that's as much responsible for Trump as anything else. The political approach that would rhetorically align you with the multiracial working class while practicing the same corporate and elite-funded politics as the GOP is morally bankrupt. The old theory of political change has been found wanting, and a new paradigm is ascendant. So just consider the bill at the heart of the latest conflict, because it's kind of a perfect example of the clash between the old and the new. Pelosi wanted more funds to ease the conditions of migrant detainees. Team AOC refused to participate in providing a few more toothbrushes to human beings locked in concentration camps. Here's how Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley put it this weekend at Netroots Nation. Quote, if we improve the lives of a child in a cage, they are still in a cage. Or consider the crowning achievement of the first Pelosi speakership, Obamacare, a moderate reform law that now stands in tatters and on the verge of complete collapse due to abandonment by the left on the one hand in favor of a better, bolder solution, and sustained and persistent attacks from the right who would rather strip their own constituents of health care than fail to own the libs. Establishment types are freaked out about what the new movement means for the party, and to be honest with you, they should be freaked out. Of course, they couch their concerns in electoral concerns. We're going to lose the country. Well, newsflash, your way of politics has already lost the country. The truth is, what terrifies them truly is an end of their reign, an end of holding power because of who you know or how many big donors you can Rolodex into your phone, an end to being able to throw your hands up and helplessly declare, well, it was the best we could do. This generation of leaders wants a revolution, and they are not going to wait in line to get it. Now, of course, I regret to inform you that President Trump has stepped into this whole mix to do what he does best and remind us all that he is just the absolute worst. He issued a series of white supremacist tweets telling AOC and her squad to go back to the countries they came from. I'm not going to put those tweets up because you already know what they say and because no, not going to do it. But suffice it to say, his open racism has, of course, served as the great Dem Party unifier once again. But do not mistake that current show of unity for true reconciliation. The old way and the new way can't be reconciled. They're going to continue to battle until one way, probably the old way, is vanquished. And nothing in this country gives me more hope than the squad's public whatever. And Saagar, this is what we've been talking about. You've got two totally different views of the current reality and of political change. You've got one who says basically we can tinker at the margins, we can work with the Republicans, we can go about this process of incrementalism that the public left, right, and center has basically rejected.
They have rejected it, and it really does go to. I'm always mystified by these Republicans, these Democrats who cling to this kind of Reaganist view of politics, and it's something that is just so out of step. We saw this in the Republican Party with President Trump in the 2016 election. Every single person is trying to disavow him. I was looking at the polling earlier today. He's more popular with Republicans than any Republican president than George W. Bush. It's not just because of what he stands for. It's also because of willing to fight for the things that the Republican base has believed in for quite a long time. I see the exact same thing in AOC and many of these other these progressive leaders.
Interesting. Well, and I know you have a different take on this same battle that's playing out. What's on your mind?
So what I'm taking a look at is the myth of Nancy Pelosi. For years, Republicans have marveled, how does Nancy Pelosi keep her caucus in line? She's such an incredible leader. She's the Iron Lady. She's somebody that we must move to emulate. It actually turns out that Nancy Pelosi is just like any other House Speaker who's dealing with a divided Congress and a divided government. What we have today is the progressive revolt that Krystal talked about. What we see is that the AOC and squad wing of the party is rebelling because they do not believe in the establishment definition of winning. Nancy Pelosi looks at winning as delivering legislation out of the House of Representatives, being able to point to that legislation when they run in 2020. They can say, we passed an alternative to health care. We passed H.R. 1 to try and get money out of politics. And they frame this as, if you just give us power back, then we'll be able to move these things through united government and eventually pass them. The progressive wing of the party says, forget it. We don't need to pass legislation. And if we do, what we should be passing is a legislation that the people that voted for us actually believe in. They don't care about short-term wins, in the words of AOC. They believe in long-term wins. And finally, we see that this myth is dismantled because Nancy Pelosi is actually failing spectacularly at keeping the progressive revolt within her caucus against the establishment wing. We see open warfare between members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Nancy Pelosi's own caucus is tweeting at AOC's chief of staff. This is something that we have never seen before in politics. Intra-party warfare that is discussed on the outside. Something that Republicans in the Tea Party wave barely were able to do. And it's something that really just dispels this notion that these establishment leaders know how to deal with these progressive revolts, grassroots revolts. And I think, Krystal, that John Boehner, Eric Cantor, Paul Ryan, and all of them send their regards to Nancy Pelosi because she's finally dealing. You know, in 2006, all she had to do was talk to Harry Reid and figure out what the Democratic Congress needed to do.
It was a different landscape.
This is. You have a Republican president, Republican Senate, and the House is like, why do we need to compromise with Republicans at all? Nothing's actually going to pass, so we might as well do what we actually believe. And Nancy Pelosi's out there trying to craft, moderate legislation or whatever. If I was if I was a progressive Democrat, I would be furious.
Yeah,
it would be the same thing.
I mean, I guess here's how I look at it. I struggle to put her in the same category as like a John Boehner because I do think she is very smart and very competent, and she does know how to work the traditional levers of power in a very effective way. The problem is that the country and that old system has broken down around her, so that moving those levers of power in the way that they used to be moved is no longer an effective way to actually go about making change. And that's why you see, that's why you see this massive...
Well, it accomplishes nothing. What is the point of passing HR? Like, actually, what was the point of passing it?
Right.
Nothing.
Whereas you can see with AOC and her activism around the Green New Deal, that really has made a difference. It's completely shaped the national conversation that we have. It has shifted the Overton window to the left, so now even Republicans are feeling like they have... the frickin' President Trump was out talking about the environment. That's how much pressure she has put on the system. So you can see which way is working.
Yeah, it just demonstrates to me that this whole myth that has been constructed around leaders, and everyone thought, oh, Pelosi is the one exception. It turns out she's not the exception. It turns out that this is a very messy business, and I think that it's just going to keep continuing as long as this exists all the way up into 2020.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time until this old way is dispatched with entirely because it's broken and the public rejects it fundamentally.
Next on Rising. This weekend, 9 cities faced ICE raids targeting thousands of illegal immigrants, most of whom had already received deportation orders.
This as the federal court makes a critical ruling against sanctuary cities. Our next guest is working on the front lines to help inform immigrants of their rights in the midst of likely roundups. Stay tuned.